The fishermen saw it from the boat, a group of people dragging a young man's body across the beach. He was carrying a Bible with an arrow lodged in it. The body was never brought back. It was 2018, and the place was North Sentinel Island, a place from which no one who has entered has ever come out alive. Years later, a YouTuber left a can of Diet Coke on the sand and ended up in jail. Before that, 2 fishermen were left impaled on bamboo stakes. For tens of thousands of years, this island has not opened its doors even once. Why do these people reject absolutely everything? The answer is completely different from what you imagine. In the middle of the Indian Ocean, in the area known as the Bay of Bengal, there is an island, 300 kilometers off the coast of Myanmar and 1,300 kilometers from mainland India. On a map, it seems to float alone, belonging to nothing. It is called North Sentinel Island, and even that name was not given to it by its own inhabitants. Outsiders invented it. If you search for it on Google Earth and zoom in, all you see is dense forest. Not a single building, road, or cultivated field. Not one trace of civilization appears in the satellite images. The only visible feature is a trail running along the coast, a path opened by bare feet over tens of thousands of years. Can you believe that a place like this still exists on Earth in 2026? It is roughly the same size as Manhattan. Manhattan has 1.6 million inhabitants. Here, at most, 200 people live. Fewer people than in a single apartment building spread across an area of land the size of an entire New York island. Why so few? The very outline of the island explains it. A coral reef surrounds it completely, like a wall. There is not a single natural harbor, so there is nowhere for a ship to dock. The coast is blocked by mangroves that act like a barrier, and the sea is rough for most of the year. It is a fortress complete with walls, cameras, and guards, except that nature itself built it. Let us return to the story from the beginning. That young man had been preparing to come to this island since high school. He trained for missionary work and gained experience in Mexico and Iraq. This island was his final destination. On the first day, the moment he stepped onto the beach, an arrow struck the Bible he was carrying. Any normal person would have turned around. That night, he wrote in his journal, "Tomorrow I'll try again." The following morning, he told the fishermen to leave without him and walk toward the beach alone. The last thing they saw was the Sentinelese dragging his body. It was never recovered, but he was not the only person who died there. In 2006, 2 fishermen drifted close to the island while fishing illegally, and they were hacked to death with axes. Their bodies were left impaled on bamboo stakes facing the sea, a scarecrow at the front door, an unmistakable warning not to enter. And in 2025 came the incident involving the YouTuber I mentioned at the beginning. A 24-year-old man left a can of Diet Coke on the sand as though it were an offering, risking his life for a video. He is currently in jail. He was denied bail. For 60,000 years, this island has not opened its doors even once. Even the Indian government no longer tries. It has declared a 9-kilometer exclusion zone around the island and limits itself to watching from a distance. If you go in, you, the intruder, are the one who ends up under arrest. Why did that young man return knowing that he could die? To understand it, you need to know the history of this island. How long have these people really been here? The answer was in their DNA. At first, scientists believed the following. Humanity left Africa around 65,000 years ago. If the Sentinelese had reached this island at that exact time and never moved again, it would be a truly chilling story. But when scientists analyzed the genetic markers inherited exclusively through the maternal line, the story changed slightly. The DNA of the indigenous peoples of the Andaman Islands contains a unique marker found nowhere else on the planet, one that does not match any other known people. When researchers traced the point at which that marker separated from the rest, the date was around 26,000 years ago. 26,000 years is long before the first pyramid was built. It is older than any civilization, dynasty, or religion we know. Throughout all that time, these people have remained in the same place. What was the Earth like back then? We were at the coldest point of the last ice age. Sea levels were much lower, so low that if you had erected a skyscraper in the middle of the ocean, its tip would have remained underwater. With the water pulled back so far, the map looked completely different. What is now the Andaman Archipelago, fragmented into hundreds of islands, was then one enormous landmass. The distance to the Asian continent was like the distance between 2 neighboring cities. It could be crossed on foot, and people walked across that passage. They left the Asian continent, crossed shallow seas, traveled through forests, and settled on this land, with no luggage, carrying only what they had on them. They ate whatever they found along the way and slept beneath the trees. The first thing they did upon arriving was probably not to light a fire, but to bring one with them. Then the Ice Age ended. Temperatures rose, the ice began to melt, and the water started rising. Less than 1 centimeter a year spread across thousands of years. No one living a single lifetime would have noticed. But after millennia, that single landmass broke apart, then broke apart again and again, until it became the hundreds of islands that exist today. The path by which they had arrived disappeared beneath the sea. A legend survives among the indigenous peoples of the Andaman Islands. They say that where there was once a heap of discarded shells, there is now a mountaintop. A shell midden at the top of a mountain can only mean one thing. That mountain was once a beach. That is how far the sea had risen. When the water finally stopped rising, these people were trapped on the island. They probably did not even realize it. The road back had sunk beneath the sea. Thus began the longest period of isolation in all of human history. For 26,000 years, no one outside the island knew that it existed. 140 years ago, a stranger set foot on its soil for the first time, and that was the beginning of the disaster. In the 13th century, Marco Polo passed near these waters and wrote that dog-headed cannibals lived there. He never set foot on the island. He merely recorded rumors he had heard in passing. For centuries, this island existed only as a terrifying legend. The first real contact came in 1880. A British colonial official named Maurice Portman landed with armed troops. The Sentinelese fled together into the forest. The men searched for days and found no one, until they finally captured 2 adults and 4 children and took them to an Indian city called Port Blair. Imagine this from the Sentinelese point of view. Unknown ships, people they had never seen before landing on the shore, with different skin and wearing clothes, accompanied by members of a neighboring tribe with whom they were enemies. And those people took their family away. It would be like aliens entering your home and abducting your loved ones. That was the first encounter. How did it end? The 2 adults fell ill and died. They had no immunity whatsoever. A simple cold virus from the outside world was deadly to them. Only the 4 children returned alive, loaded with gifts. Essentially, it was like killing a family and then giving toys to their children in return. After that, outsiders kept coming. In 1967, an Indian government research team entered with reinforcements. They found an empty hut with a fire still burning. The people had once again fled into the forest. The team took the tools it found lying around like a conquering army looting occupied territory. In 1974, a National Geographic film crew arrived bearing gifts: coconuts, a live pig, dolls, and plastic cars. The reaction of the Sentinelese was unmistakable. They kept the coconuts, speared the pig, and buried it, and threw away the dolls. An arrow also struck the documentary director in the thigh. Who fired it? A man who remained dancing beneath the shade of a tree, proudly showing himself off. He had defended his territory, and he was proud of it. And here is something that makes your hair stand on end. The neighboring tribes from this same part of the Andaman Islands, the ones that did accept contact with the outside world, that exchanged goods, traded, and tried to coexist, ended up like this. The great Andamanese, who once numbered 5,000 people, enough to fill an entire stadium, were reduced to 19. Not even enough to fill a bus. The same thing happened to the Ong, from several hundred to just over 100. Smallpox, measles, alcohol, and the loss of their land. Every tribe that accepted contact collapsed. Only the tribe that rejected it completely survived. The bodies displayed like scarecrows, the arrows fired at a helicopter, the arrowhead lodged in a Bible. It was all the same message. Do not enter. That was not savagery. It was the coldest possible calculation made by people who had watched their neighbors die after allowing the outside world in. But these people do not merely reject things. They are far more intelligent than we usually assume. Have you ever camped without a lighter? Without a gas stove, matches, or even a single ember in the middle of the forest? Most people would not last a day. These people do not know lighters. They do not know matches. They do not have the technology to create fire from scratch. Instead, they look to the sky. They wait for lightning to strike and collect the fire that catches on a tree. From that moment on, they never allow it to go out. They have been doing this for tens of thousands of years. In 1967, when the research team entered an empty hut, no one was there, but the fire was still burning, like an empty house with the heating still running. For these people, fire is not a tool that is manufactured. It is something that is guarded. Once it goes out, it cannot be recovered. That is why there is a firekeeper shift, and when they move, they carry the embers with them. And there is more. In 1981, a cargo ship traveling from Bangladesh to Australia ran aground on the island's reef after a storm. It was called the MV Primrose, an enormous ship, the size of hundreds of trucks put together. The following morning, dozens of Sentinelese appeared on the beach carrying bows and spears, and canoes were seen approaching the ship. The crew armed themselves with axes and pipes and stood guard throughout the night. They were not rescued by helicopter until an entire day had passed. The most astonishing part came afterward. The Sentinelese stripped iron from the wreck. They heated the steel from a modern cargo ship over a fire and hammered it with stones until they had turned it into arrowheads. It was like dismantling an aircraft that had fallen from space in order to forge swords. People who still use stone tools dismantled a modern ship and turned it into weaponry. Primitive? This is mastering an unknown material using the technology they already understood. You do not need to be an engineer to understand the level of skill that implies. In 2004, the worst earthquake ever recorded in the Indian Ocean occurred. The tsunami devastated the entire Andaman archipelago. The island itself rose by the height of a person. The surrounding reefs were exposed and the coastline extended outward by several football fields. 2 days later, a helicopter arrived to assess the damage, assuming that the island had been destroyed. But arrows came flying from the beach. They were alive. People without cell phones, a weather service, or any emergency warning had escaped the tsunami on their own. How? By reading the direction of the wind, the color of the sea, and the direction in which the birds were flying. Tens of thousands of years of knowledge accumulated on that island proved faster than any weather forecast. The survival manual inherited from their ancestors was more accurate than an alert on a phone. And it is even more interesting to see how they react to gifts. If you give them a coconut, they accept it. If you give them a piece of metal, they accept that too. But if you give them a live pig, they spear it and bury it. If you give them a plastic doll, they simply throw it away. What they know, they accept. What they do not know, they eliminate. This is not an emotional reaction. It is a system. Accept the familiar, eliminate the unfamiliar. It is not primitivism. It is absolutely rigorous risk management. And one question remains. What are we in their eyes? On the neighboring islands lives a tribe called the Onge, who divide the world into only two categories, that which connects and that which cuts. Burying prey, weaving a basket, bringing the family together. All of that belongs to the side of things that connect. Metal belongs to the other side, something that comes from outside, causes bleeding, and brings chaos. Useful, but dangerous by nature. Another Andaman tribe, the Jarawa, call themselves our people. They use another term for anyone from outside, one that roughly means the others. The world is divided between us and them. No matter how warmly a stranger smiles, that person is still one of them. It is very likely that the Sentinelese see the world according to exactly the same logic. Any stranger is, by definition, a threat. And there is a story that is genuinely chilling. A young man had been born Sentinelese, but as a child he left the island in a canoe and grew up on a neighboring island among the Ongj, learning their language. Years later, Portman himself took him back to his native island in an attempt to find his people. The man encountered his own people at sea and spoke to them in their own language. He probably even called them by name. There was no response. Stop and think about that for a moment. He spoke their language, he may have played with some of them as a child, and he was saying their names. Yet no one turned their head. Instead, arrows came. It was as though a friend who had been away for 20 years returned to his village and found every door locked. That same man eventually refused to remain on the island. This is not a language problem. It is pure fear. Anyone who has left once is no longer one of us, because no one knows what that person may have brought back from outside. It could be a disease, it could be chaos, it could be a catastrophe. In 1991, a researcher left coconuts floating in the water near the shore, and several Sentinelese men entered the sea to collect them. One of them even came out onto the beach without weapons, but a young man aimed his bow at the researcher. At that exact moment, a Sentinelese woman standing beside him pushed the man's arm and deflected the arrow. There were individuals who were not hostile, but the community's decision was one and the same: keep the door closed. Accepting the coconut, burying the pig, throwing away the doll, rejecting even their own people. This is not savagery driven by emotion. It is a system that accepts the familiar and blocks the unfamiliar, a survival operating system that has been functioning for tens of thousands of years. Every tribe that accepted contact collapsed. Their numbers fell from thousands to dozens, their languages were lost, and their traditions were broken. Only the tribe that closed the door survived. It was not savagery. It was probably the most rational survival strategy on the entire planet. Imagine the moment, 26,000 years ago, in the middle of the Ice Age, with the sea slowly rising, the land breaking apart, and the road to the continent disappearing beneath the water. The descendants of the people who lived through that are still, at this very moment, guarding a fire on that same island. And you, right now, are watching this on a screen, in a heated room. In between, pyramids were built, entire countries rose and fell, and the phone you are holding was invented. Throughout all that time, these people have done only one thing: guard the fire, keep the door closed, and survive. Their lives may be simpler than ours, but they have endured for much longer. Tell me what you think in the comments. Should we leave them alone forever, or do you believe that at some point we should try knocking on that door again? And if you found this story interesting, you know what to do. Subscribe, because here we continue opening doors that history had considered closed.